people to do things today that were previously impossible. Companies that only use technology and robots just to cut jobs and do less are going to be surpassed by those who use it to help them do better and more. That's the challenge, and that's the two schools. I'm a strong believer, by the way, of the second school. Third uncertainty, the origin of the next crisis. So in my introductory remarks, I said that the world is in better shape today than it has ever been. However, it doesn't mean that the world is without crisis. There will be crisis. Now, where is the next crisis coming from? We don't know. Political? Is it going to be a debt crisis? We saw the figures. A bond crisis? Excess liquidity issue? A lot of bankers in the room know about this. Is it going to be a war between Sunnites and Shiites? Is it going to be a problem with North Korea? Is it with China? Nobody knows. The fact is, we're going to have crisis. 4, the future of democracies. And this is a subject in itself, so I'm not going to elaborate much today, but I'm working on a whole presentation on this because I think that our democracies are not threatened, but are being challenged. Global malaise, crisis of legitimacy, rise of populist movements across the board. Tony Blair, the ex-Prime Minister of England, of the United Kingdom, calls it the efficacy challenge. And Danny Roderick, I'm quoting him, says, today democratic governments perform poorly and their future remains very much in doubt. The core, you know, we talked about growing inequality. We talked last year about disconnection from constituencies and so on. The core of the crisis of representative democracy is due to a widening gap between people's aspiration and expectations and the capacity of political institutions to respond and influence the future of their societies. Big challenge. And this is just starting when we look at the tools that tech companies are creating. That's a subject, obviously, today. And the fact that they're getting out of control and participating to this democratic crisis. 5th uncertainty, and that's going to be the last one, the role of wellness. The skyrocketing cost of chronic disease. I'm going to mention the figure, $47 trillion by 2030, which is 30% of the world GDP, is not sustainable. So wellness should not be optional as it is today. Wellness should become mandatory. There is a positive correlation, in addition, between happiness and entrepreneurship. I'm not going to elaborate on this, but Gallup is doing very interesting surveys. It's called with Healthways, and it's called the Gallup Healthway Wellbeing Index at the world level. Is very interesting. So you can look at this. Are you happy? Yes, no. A good beginning. So with all of this said, are you ready? No. When you look at the world, it's complex and challenging. Are you ready? I think we can be ready through collaboration. Almost always, great new ideas do not emerge from one single person or one single organization. They emerged from the intersection of functions of people or organizations who very often have not even met before. These are the great ideas. But organizations are siloed. Politicians are siloed. Social leaders are siloed. Entrepreneurs are the same. Business leaders are the same. Altogether, they are siloed. We can notice that each time academics, politicians, economic and social leaders, entrepreneurs connect, get together and collaborate, they fuel change and deal with issues. Collaboration is essential. And there is no collaboration without connection. And collaboration and connection should be the underlying theme of discussion or philosophy of today and tomorrow. Now, a brief video as conclusion.
When I think about connection, I think about intersubjectivity. I think about the human capacity to pierce beyond the veil of individuation and to enter the wholly other, to blast new tunnels between the mind and the other. We resist, we refuse to live alone inside of our own minds. Instead, we crave an intersubjective ecstasy. We crave a crossing over. We create cinema that allows us to experience a dialectic shift, to enter the subject, the interiority of another person. That's why cinema is an engine of empathy, because it allows you to enter that something else, that someone else, that somewhere else, to pierce the veil that separates us from one another, to enter a kind of technologically mediated Buddhism, to create an internet that links together billions of minds, transcending time, space, and distance, collapsing geography. All becomes one. What is within becomes without. This is kind of wonderful, right? When I think about connections, I think about understanding, which, as Carl Sagan says, is a kind of ecstasy. So that with comprehension comes meaning, comes signification. That's what I think about when I think about connection.
So today and tomorrow, collaboration, connections. Thank you.
So we now have a global perspective of growth. So last night, if you remember, Reverend Jackson, as well as Ambassador Young, were talking about stocks. Look toward international stocks for your growth in that area. Thanks again to Philippe Bergenon. Next up, we are pleased to welcome the co-founder and chairman emeritus of Conscious Capitalism, Mr. Raj Sisodia.
Good morning. Good morning. I thought I was getting a response back. Thank you. Wonderful to be here. What an inspiring evening we had last night. I was just blown away to see those iconic figures up here and living history in front of our eyes and inspiring us all, really, with their sacrifices and their vision for a better world and hope. And I think hope is inextricably tied up with this idea of healing. And if there's one institution in the world that needs to take a greater role in healing our world, I think it's business. Because business has a greater impact on our lives in a free society than any other societal institution. So I'm going to share with you some thoughts this morning about the healing organization. Can business be a source and a force for healing in our lives and in society and in the world? Where for too many, it's actually the biggest source of stress, where heart attacks are highest on Monday morning, where people develop chronic diseases and they burn out and so forth. And we think that is the price that you have to pay in order to earn a living. Well, that's too high a price, and we don't need to pay such a price. In fact, the opposite can be true. We can become whole and we can become healed through our work, if that work has meaning and if it has dignity, and if we do it in a way where it actually fulfills and nourishes the whole person. So how can business restore our humanity and save the planet? If you think about our world today, we've made a tremendous amount of progress. There's no question about it. Especially in the last 200 years since the origins of capitalism, humanity has taken off almost on a vertical trajectory, and we have made massive improvements from life expectancy to literacy to per capita incomes, etc. And yet, if you look around in the world today, there is no shortage of suffering. There is extraordinary amounts of suffering. There are thousands of children dying every day around the world of preventable causes. There are millions, 45 million Americans suffering from debilitating anxiety. Physical violence is down dramatically, 95, even 99% down compared to historic norms. Murders are down, wars are down, terrorism is down. All of that is true, but psychic suffering is on the rise. Anxiety is on the rise. Depression is on the rise. Suicides have gone up 25% in this country in the last 15 years. there's a tremendous, and it's not, by the way, restricted only to poorer countries or poorer neighborhoods, etc. This is an issue across the board. The need for healing is paramount because suffering is still widely prevalent around the world. And given that there is so much suffering, there can be no nobler purpose than for us to be an instrument of healing. I believe that is the meta purpose of our age for each of us as individuals and for any organizations that we create, such as this one, Project Hope. It's an extraordinarily healing organization, but I believe every organization at some level can be a healing organization. Because the fact is that we do need a tremendous amount of healing. We need to heal ourselves, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Our families and our communities need healing. We need to heal our companies and our countries. You know, this country and many other countries have never been as divided as they are today. We need to heal our planet, certainly, and all the life that is on it. And we need to heal the past. It's one of the things that I think in this country we don't do very well is learn how to heal the past. What they did in South Africa with the wisdom of Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, the truth and reconciliation process, acknowledging what has gone on in the past before you can actually build a future. And I think that's something that we need to do here much more. And that's something also that organizations need to do, recognize what has passed before we can move on into the future. So there's, again, a tremendous need for healing. And if we do not consciously choose to be part of the healing, we may actually be part of the hurting without even wanting to. Very few people actually want to hurt others, but somehow we are not mindful, we're not conscious, and therefore we do things that end up causing unnecessary suffering. You know, suffering can be noble if it has a higher purpose to it. But most of the suffering I'm talking about is unnecessary and does not serve a higher purpose. It simply comes from ignorance. It comes from a lack of consciousness. It comes from a lack of caring. And it's a connection to the heart when we go to work. And the reality is that 88% of Americans feel that they work for a company that does not care about them as human beings, that views them as a pair of hands or as the function or the object. You know, they're an object and the function that they perform in the company. They only matter to that extent. And when people feel this way at work, it impacts their life. The way we lead and the way we work impacts the way we live, and therefore impacts our children. It impacts future generations. There's a dramatic impact of what happens and how it happens at work. And the fact is that even though at some level it feels like we're living in this is the richest country in the world going through one of the most prosperous phases seemingly in its history. Stock market at record highs, unemployment almost at record lows. And the fact still remains, however, that 50% of Americans have less than $400 in the bank and could not raise $2,000 within 30 days if they had an emergency or a need. A car breaks down and something happens to the house or there's a health problem. You are that close to financial ruin and disaster. And that's 50% of our population. This is not a small segment suffering in this way. In fact, 60% of American households are technically insolvent. Their liabilities exceed their assets. They are bankrupt without having declared bankruptcy. And that in an era of historically low interest rates. When interest rates go back to normal levels, what's going to happen? So again, there's a huge amount of suffering under the surface. There's a huge amount of stress and distress that is going on. And for the most part, we are not doing much about it. Financial stress is certainly, as I said, endemic in our system. And that is not only a cloud that hangs over people all the time and affects every waking moment of their life and their ability to sleep, but it impacts all kinds of other things, from migraines to depression to anxiety and blood pressure and heart disease and everything else, right? So again, we are literally killing people by the way we work, the way we organize. Our healthcare crisis is a crisis of caring at work. 75% of our healthcare budget is due to chronic disease. 75% of that is due to stress, and 75% of that is at work. Right? So again, we have to start healing at work if we're going to heal our society. And all of the things that people go through in terms of financial stress and distress, many of these things can be avoided if we start focusing on taking care of people and putting people at the center. As Herb Keller has said, the business of business is people, yesterday, today, and forever. But we have made the business of business profit, and people as a means to that end. Profit needs to be a means to the end of elevating human flourishing. That's what the conscious capitalism movement is really about. So as I said, most traditional businesses end up being a source of hurting for people. Because people come in early in their careers, healthy, they're whole, they're over time get burned out, they become cynical, they become disengaged, and they get chronic health conditions. And does it have to be that way? Is that a price we have to pay for the ability to work? And it is not. The fact is that the human costs of doing business are unacceptably high. We put a price on everything except suffering. How much suffering goes into all the things that goods and services that we buy? We don't account for that. Whether it's animal suffering or human suffering, that goes into that. And these costs, we do elaborate cost accounting of everything that goes into our businesses, but we do not capture and we do not put a price on suffering. And here's the great irony. Even our healing professions, doctors, nurses, veterinarians, are suffering tremendously. The rates of suicide and drug addiction and depression are much higher, actually, in those professions. So we've taken even noble healing work and we have made it a source of suffering because of the way we organize work, the way in which we run our businesses. So the way we work isn't working, and we need to change that. And we believe that if it is done right, business actually can alleviate suffering and it can elevate joy, more so than any other institution in society. So this is not about setting up a healing business. It's not about saying, let's get into yoga and spas and those kinds of businesses. This is saying business of any kind can be done in a healing way. It is about business as healing. Because when business comes from a place of service, when it comes from a place of meeting people's real needs, when it comes from a place of respect and dignity and caring and vulnerability and empathy and passion and compassion, it is indeed a place that you will go and heal. Can be done. It does exist, therefore it must be possible. So how can this be done? How can business become a source and a force for healing? The great James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And the fact is, we are not facing up to this reality. The hidden suffering, the not so hidden suffering that is out there. What is our role, our culpability in that as leaders and as businesses? If we do not face that, if we do not open our eyes, as they say, you will see it when you believe it. If you refuse to believe it, so we're giving you a job, isn't that enough? No, it's not enough. So we have to face this before we can do anything about it. And I want to share with you a story we heard from one of our CEOs that we've been interviewing for this book called The Healing Organization. We call it the parable of the pothole. So imagine that this company, we've got the white-collar professional, salaried people, and then we have the 80% of people who are working hourly in this company. It's a call center company. Instead, imagine our CFO, Chief Financial Officer, is driving to work, and her car hits this pothole. And the tire blows out, and there's some damage to the rim, etc. And so she has to pull over, call AAA, get the car towed over to the Mercedes dealer, and then she calls for another ride, gets to the office an hour late, and everybody is very conciliatory and saying, oh my God, are you okay? What an ordeal you went through. And later that afternoon, the car is delivered back to her office, nicely washed and polished. Now imagine that one of the hourly workers is driving that same highway, and her car hits that same pothole. She does not have AAA. She does not have insurance. This is going to be $700, $800. She doesn't know where that's going to come from. Has to pay for a tow truck somehow to get the car taken away, and then has to call a bunch of friends to try to get a ride. And ends up 3 hours late at work, gets called into the supervisor, gets reprimanded, gets a black mark against her record. 3 of these and you're out. And then she's told, okay, now go be nice to our customers on the phone. It's a non-event for the CFO, and we're conciliatory, we care, we are empathetic. It is a huge deal for this other human being. Nobody cares. We are adding to her burdens. Rather than recognizing her suffering, we're making it worse. And this CEO had his eyes open to this reality within his own company. He said, my God, there are 2 universes within my same company. There's the hourly people, 118% turnover, 15% engagement, and there are all the salaried people. I've got 75% engagement, I've got 15% turnover. We thought everything was fine because we focus over here. And he said, we have to figure out what's going on and how can we improve the lives and how can we help and how can we reduce that turnover and reduce some of that suffering that's going on there. So they started a program called Dream On. It's kind of like the Make-A-Wish. They said, if you have a need in your life, if there's an emergency, there's something that we can help, please come forward. We want to help. We don't want people to be suffering. We're a family here. And nobody responded for 2 weeks because, again, people are stoic and people are heroic. The burdens that they carry around and they deal with, and they still do their work and they show up, it's extraordinary what people are doing while they're carrying around these burdens. And people have pride. And for 2 weeks, nobody responded. And finally, they heard from one of the employees. And she said, I'm really sorry, but I didn't know where else to turn. My ex-husband stopped paying alimony 2 weeks ago, and we got evicted from our apartment a week ago. And my 2 kids and I have been living in a car for a week now. And I just can't do this to them. And I'm really sorry, but I need help. And this comes across, and the CEO reads this, and the only thing he feels is a deep sense of shame. He said, what the hell am I doing here? I started this company, and somebody who works for me full-time is homeless, and she couldn't even tell us. What kind of a company is this? So, of course, they immediately got her into a hotel, and then within a week, they helped her get an apartment and pay the first month and last month and all those hurdles that people have to overcome, which for many people is a hurdle too far high, which they can never overcome. And they told her, you don't have to tell others. This is okay. We can keep this confidential. She said, are you kidding? Nobody has ever done anything like this for me. I'm going to tell everybody I know. And the next thing, the floodgates opened, and so many people came pouring forward. It broke their heart, but it also gave them an opportunity to serve. There were quite a few people who were homeless. There were other people who were dealing with all kinds of traumas and, aging parents and children and all kinds of, life. And we can help, right? And of course, there's an enlightened self-interest element to it. If you do that, those people are obviously going to be far more effective and impactful and powerful at work. But you don't do it for that reason. You do it, this is a fellow human being in distress. And they're part of our family as being part of our company. Another way to heal is to challenge the dogmas and the normal ways of being within industries. So there's a gentleman here, there's a company called JBN Consulting, and Nigel, who runs this company, is an Atlanta-based consulting firm. He grew up in the consulting industry where you're gone Monday to Thursday every week. And he said, I essentially missed the childhood of my kids. And now they're grown up and it's too late. And that's a pretty high price to pay to be a consultant. So he said, you know what, in this company, you're not going to travel for work. All of our clients will be local. There's plenty of great companies in Atlanta. We've got enough business. If we have a lot of companies in Dallas, we're going to open another office there because children are our stakeholders. The children of our employees are stakeholders in our company. Their future depends on how we operate. It is unacceptable for us to do things that will harm those kids. Too high a price to pay. And therefore, they've made this a norm now. And by the way, 3 of the top 20 consultants in the country work for this little Atlanta company now. Because this matters. And most people never ask for this because they didn't know it's possible. If you want to be a consultant, that is part of the price you pay. And yet there's a consciousness, a healing consciousness from the leader that said, I paid this price. I don't want others to pay this price. Construction company in Bellingham, Washington, again, 2 men who grew up in a very brutal environment. And they said, we don't want this to be, we love construction. We don't love the way construction is practiced. And so they started a company, Ram Construction, where they made 2 rules. They told the employees, you tell us the 2 things that matter the most to you. We'll focus all our attention on making sure those things happen for you. And we'll tell you what matters to us. And please make sure that that happens for us. Employees wanted good pay and flexible working conditions so they could be there for their families. They said, okay, we're going to make sure we do that. What do we need from you? We need safety. Okay, that makes sense. And we need kindness. The one thing that will get you fired in this company is not being consistently kind to others. Okay, nothing else. So that's what matters. And again, started by 2 men. By the way, both of them are sons of teachers. That consciousness of the mother, okay, is the healing energy that exists within these companies. Social sadness. This is a great country, but there are certain blots on our record, one of which is the prison system. Do you know that 70 million Americans have some kind of a criminal record, mostly for non-violent, non-serious things, and yet they've had to pay a steep price, and they have paid the price. The same number of Americans that have a college degree also have some kind of prison record or criminal records. They have to check that box. And for most of them, in addition to the credit score thing that John has articulated so brilliantly, is also that issue for so many people. And so Greyston Bakery in Yonkers was started by a rabbi. And he said, I want to give people a first chance. There are tens of millions of people in our country who never even get a first chance. Forget about a second chance. Because they grow up in these environments, they're terrible schools, and they're surrounded by crime and violence and poverty, and they never are able to escape that. So he said, they bake brownies for Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and they supply Whole Foods. And they said, we don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people. And they don't do any background checks. They have an open hiring model. You need a job, there's a list, you put your name on the list, they go down the list. Next person gets trained and hired. A young man named Dion who came to our conference, he had tears in his eyes. He said, I've been in jail 3 times, and every time I come out, I look for a job, and nobody wants to give me a job. And finally, I end up on the street doing whatever I did to survive. And this time, I found Grayston. And he said, now I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I have a job, and I have an apartment. If it were not for this company, I would be dead or I would be back in jail. This is the power of business, to lift lives, to give people opportunity. Business can heal communities. There's a wonderful grocery chain in Texas named H-E-B. When the hurricane happened recently, and every hurricane, every disaster that happens, they show up before FEMA and before Red Cross. They open within days. They have fleets of trucks. They have fleets of helicopters. They do everything to be done in order to serve the people. By the way, the chairman of this company, this was started by the grandmother of the current chairman, Chuck Butts. And he said to the CEO, please pay our people as much as possible. He didn't say pay them as little as possible so we can maximize profit. Please pay people as much as possible. And this is a highly successful chain that has low prices and tremendously innovative products and great customer care and does everything right. It's coming from a place of healing that emanated from the source, the grandmother. This is a company that's in Kentucky, in coal country, which is a lot in the news lately. And this young man started an IT software development company where for a while he was outsourcing all of it to India, and the offices were based in Kentucky, but then you had all these people who are unemployed. So he said, you know what, I'm going to train the coal miners to become coders. And I'm going to bring that work back from India into Kentucky, right? Because the local community now needs these jobs, and these people need a future. And he did that, again, healing that community through the power of business. Kentucky Code will do for the next 100 years what Kentucky Coal did for the last 100 years. I believe our political divide, the left-right divide in society, also can be healed through business, because it was unconscious capitalism that gave rise to militant unions, socialism, communism. Those things never existed before we had capitalism and before we had the abuses of capitalism, which was treating people like objects, the terrible working conditions, trying to maximize profit by squeezing people. It has to be conscious capitalism, putting people at the center, human dignity as a paramount value. That will then heal this divide where people don't trust business, but they look to government to rescue them, save them, protect them from business. That's never the answer. We have to heal business. We have to evolve business to a deeper consciousness. So how does this happen? It is really the consciousness of the leader. Leaders set the tone. The microcosm is reflected in the macrocosm. What's inside shows up on the outside in the organization. And so we have to be very careful who gets elevated into leadership. What is their consciousness? What's their level of emotional and spiritual maturity and intelligence? As John Kenneth Galbraith said, all great leaders have one characteristic in common: the willingness to confront unequivocally the major anxiety of people in their time. Our people have many anxieties in these times. We need leaders who are not going to add to those anxieties, who are actually going to help alleviate those by creating healing organizations. And as the Dalai Lama said, our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you cannot help them, at least don't hurt them. And I'm afraid we're doing a lot of that. We are hurting a lot of people in the pursuit of profit. The great and sad irony is that we would actually make more profit and we'd be more successful if we heal the people and take care of the people. Because it is people ultimately who make any business succeed. And you know, it is later than we realize. In Martin Luther King's phrase, there's a fierce urgency of now. And in the play Hamilton, there's a song about Alexander Hamilton in there about he wrote 31 Federalist Papers in 6 months, right? And the question was, why do you write like you're running out of time? Write day and night like you're running out of time. Every day you fight. We are running out of time. We don't have the luxury of time. This is an urgent situation. We have to do something about it today. So ultimately, it's about the people. If we take care of the people in every dimension and take care of help them take care of their families and their children, they will take care of the business. But that's where it begins, by taking care of the people. Thank you very much. And again, very happy to be here. And thank you, John. Thank you.
Did he wake you up? Huh? This is about the world. It's not just about us. And we have the power to make a change. Once again, thank you to Raj Sosidia. That was fantastic. By the way, Raj will be signing copies of his book at the Hope Bookstore outside of the ballroom later this morning at 10:30. Next up, we have three leaders who will talk about putting purpose to practice, a little bit more of caring for others. We are now welcoming to the stage, all from SunTrust, Mr. Bill Rogers, Chairman and CEO, Margaret Callahan, Chief Human Resources Officer, and Brian Nelson Ford, Financial Wellbeing Executive.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to first speak to Raj, who's left the stage, and say to Raj, we accept the challenge for healing from within. And we really think that's exactly where that starts. I refuse to be interrupted by John Hope Bryant, but I guess I will be.
Hello, hello.
Hi,
Hello, everybody. You guys enjoying yourself so far? Are you enjoying yourself so far? Let's pump it up here in Atlanta. Look, Raj was fantastic. And I was sitting there taking screenshots and sending it to you, thinking you were at your office, not realizing you were backstage.
Thanks a lot.
And then Philippe Bourguignon, who really founded, I don't know where Philippe is, Philippe, who spoke before us, who was chairman of the World Economic Forum, is now chairing this, did a great job. I wanted everybody to know that without this man sitting here, Bill Rogers, believing in me and believing in our dream, we would not have orders of 500 Hope Insides around this country. We would not have a vision of having 1,000 Hope Insides. 200 of our 500 Hope Insides were ordered by SunTrust Bank. 12% of all of their bank branches will be Hope Inside locations by the year 2020. That's how much he believes. He didn't have to do it. He could have done one or two and made it tokenism. He still would have got credit for it, but he decided to put both feet in it, do it like he believed it, walk and talk like he lived it. And I won't tell anybody how much he actually is a softie really inside and a really, really cool guy. And I won't tell anybody that I love you, Bill Rogers. I absolutely love you. All right, have a good day.
Well, John's taken half of our presentation, as usual, but John, thank you. And no, I don't want anyone to know that I'm a softie and that, you know, I can hug and say I love you and all those kinds of things. So thank you. I think as Raj said, though, the healing from within is how we start. I mean, we don't use the words unconscious capital. The words we use is purpose and being a purpose-driven company. And we define our purpose as lighting the way to financial well-being. Raj talked a lot about CEOs and make assumptions and learn things about their own companies, and I was on that same journey. 3 years ago, I made sort of the assumption that our teammates would be different. 24,000 teammates at SunTrust, I thought they'd be different. I thought they would have savings for an emergency savings account. I thought they had planned for retirement because that's what we advise all our clients to do. Fortunately, I had a lot of really smart people like these teammates beside me that said, well, why don't you challenge your own assumptions? Why don't we do a survey? And we did a survey, and what we found out is that 40% of our teammates were under some type of financial stress. 40%. That was a huge number. And so the wake-up call for us was if we were going to be on a purpose journey, if lighting the way to financial well-being for our communities and for our clients was our mission, we actually had to start at home. We had to start at home. And we all know Americans are literally one car repair, one medical bill away from financial distress. And we didn't want our teammates to be one of those statistics. That just was unacceptable to us. I am very honored to have just two of our absolute best purpose-driven leaders in our company beside me, so I'm going to let them do most of the talking. I have Margaret Callahan, our Chief Human Resources Officer, who who literally, if she walks into a room, everybody says, "Oh no, here comes the purpose thing," and she delivers it in just an exemplary fashion. And then Brian has the title of Financial Wellbeing Executive, which I actually thought was my title, but apparently it's not. Apparently that's your title. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's just talk about some of these issues. And Margaret, you know, going back to the launch of our internal movement, which we now label Momentum On Up, just talk about what that did for our teammates. I mean, you were really the voice in the ear of our teammates.
Well, Bill, it was such a great example of our purpose in action, and so much fun to be able to respond to what you found in the survey, that our teammates really had the same financial stress that the rest of the world had. So what we did is we went out and partnered with a leading third-party provider to launch a behavior-based learning program for our teammates to really focus on their financial well-being. And the idea of the program was really to focus on 8 different modules that covered everything from budgeting to aligning spending with the values to retirement planning, and to allow our teammates to do this at home with their families where decisions are ultimately made about finances. Families need to be part of this together. And our ultimate goal was to get our teammates to a place where we could change some of those statistics, where they could have $2,000 in an emergency savings plan, which, by the way, SunTrust matched by half with $1,000. And we started at that time, and we continue to this day, offering a whole paid day for our teammates to focus on their own financial well-being, whatever that might be, from planning a will, working on a budget, talking with the family about finances, and we call it our Day of Purpose. So we think it was an amazing answer to delivering on what we heard our teammates really needed.
Okay, Margaret, you know I love results.
Yes, sir. You love results.
I love results.
I know.
So talk about some of the results. What are some things we saw?
The results were really dramatic. From that 40% you started with, after we launched our programs and our teammates started through it, now 77% of our teammates say they are more financially confident. And that is a huge,
that's a big difference.
Huge result. On top of that, now we have spent $10 million for the 20,000 teammates who have gone through that program to advance their financial well-being. So, you know, interestingly, we have those kind of numbers, but as you heard from Raj before us, other things started happening. Retention improved, engagement improved, and while I haven't been able to directly correlate it yet, but I'm working on it, our year-over-year company growth has gone just out the roof, and I think this is part of it.
I do too.
I really do believe it.
I think they're inextricably linked.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned we use this company.
World-leading
company called 8 Pillars, which was based in Utah. I had a personal experience which I haven't shared with Brian, and Brian was the leader of this company. I came into one of the first sessions. I snuck into the back. Nobody knew I was there except the 5 or 6 teammates who were sitting with me. I had just taped a wonderful, I thought, video about our 401k match. I thought it was fantastic. The teammates were going to love it. We had a really competitive program. Brian was standing in front of the audience, and he said, how many of you would invest $1 if you could get 100% interest? Oh my gosh, every hand in the room went up. And he said, how many of you know that your company offers that? And about 20% of the hands went up. I realized I wasn't communicating in a way that people were listening. So Brian, we decided to just do everything. We bought all the assets of the company. We hired Brian. We brought him into the fold. So talk about what it means. Being a financial wellness executive, not every company has one of those. So talk about what that means. When you carry your card around, what happens?
Yeah, no, I definitely get questions from time to time, like financial well-being executive? Did they just like make that title up, or is that real? I love it because it spurs a conversation about what we do at SunTrust, and I get to tell people that my sole responsibility is to get companies to care more about their employees, to get companies to get more of their employees in a better place financially. And for someone who is, I would say, wildly passionate about personal finance and someone who cares deeply about people, I couldn't imagine a better role. So I feel very fortunate to be at SunTrust and to be a part of this movement.
So talk about, you said other companies, so talk about that. So talk about what we're doing, what you've taken on. So we talked about our own teammates, but that learning was so significant. What are we doing from there?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So we had great success with our own teammates. And in fact, one banker, I think, is a little microcosm. This story is a microcosm of what we're doing going beyond just our own teammates. Because this one banker said, look, the program got me in a better place financially, but then I wanted my family to participate. So I started telling my husband and my 3 kids, and they said, no, we're fine. We're good. We don't need this. But then she started participating in the program on weekends, on the mornings of weekends, in the kitchen, watching the videos. And her boys went from, what is she doing? To, what did he just say in that video? To, when are we going to watch the next video? And I like that story because it's representative of what we're trying to do at SunTrust, which is we started with our own teammates, we had tremendous success, and we said, more people need this. How can we bring this external to corporate America? And very pleased to report now we have almost 100 companies actively participating in Momentum On Up. Companies like Delta, Home Depot. You know, you've got even Zappos, Waffle House, wonderful companies that are saying we can do better. We're going to get our employees in a better place financially, which we're very excited about. So we've launched it. We offer it at cost, so we're not looking to make a profit at SunTrust on this. And we're excited, but we're just getting going.
You know, one of the things that the two of you didn't mention is, Brian, I remember you told me that employer-driven financial well-being plans have about a 3 to 4% participation rate. Margaret, what's ours?
Oh gosh, we are way up in the 80s. Yeah, really high participation.
80% of our teammates participate in some type of financial wellness program versus the average of being 3 to 4%. Mm-hmm. When I talk to CEOs and we have this conversation about what's important to you, and we generally, you know, we start talking about all the banking stuff and their capital allocation and what are they thinking about their future and M&A. But when you get to what are you really worried about? What are you really thinking about? And it always relates to their teammates. I'm having a hard time employing. I'm having a hard time retaining. And Raj showed a couple of statistics. We see the same thing. 75% of your employees don't think you care about their financial well-being. They don't think you care about their financial well-being. So think about that. 3 out of 4 have you in that position. So while companies think we've done a great job on the physical well-being side, maybe not so much on the financial well-being. So Brian, talk about what it's like when you go to another company and you talk about Momentum On Up for companies, because they're the hero in the story. It's not a SunTrust deal.
Yeah, that's something that we wanted to be very conscious of, is that it's not the SunTrust program. It's Gas South's, you know, financial ninja training for their employees. It's Home Depot's path to financial fitness. And so these companies are making it their own, which is very exciting. And I think that's a big part of why it's succeeding. In fact, you know, when you go into companies, at first they're kind of like, now, don't we already pay them and we give them a 401k and we've got health? But then there are certain CEOs that just get it, like Bill's talking about. And that's who we're looking for. We're looking for companies that care. That really want to make a difference, and we are making a difference. You know, what's exciting is if you look at people who are budgeting, before we start, only about 43% of people are budgeting to some degree. We're getting that up into the 87% mark. As far as people who know their net worth, about 68%. When we're done, it's 98%. And when it comes to emergency savings, the average person in Momentum On Up is saving $1,254 more after we've gone there, which is exciting. My favorite statistic is employees are contributing to their retirement accounts 35% more. And that's a big difference. It's a really big difference. The difference between someone not participating in the 401k and participating might be a $200,000 to $300,000 decision. And we're getting employees there, which is exciting.
One of my favorite stories is we have a client who's a privately held company in South Georgia. And their owner Talk about that story, what their owner did. I think it's a fantastic story.
Yeah, a company called IBP, Installed Building Products. The CEO there, his name's Jeff Edwards. And he said, not only are we going to do Momentum on Up, I want to give a $1,000 incentive to any employee who completes the program, sets up their emergency account. Now, this is $1,000 out of his pocket. They have 6,000 employees.
Yeah, it should be
2,600 are participating, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, I can say that you know, I've rolled out some big programs for some big companies. And before I joined SunTrust, I remember one of my teammates came to me and said, did you know SunTrust is going to give $1,000 to their employees to go through the program? And I was like, no, you misunderstood. You know, they were talking about their 401k. I had never heard of anything like that. That got my attention. That's why I moved my family. I've got 3...
Which is a big undertaking for Brian, by the way.
I've got 4 children. I've got 2 teenage daughters. They're in high school, and we're from out west. But when I had an opportunity to join SunTrust, I jumped at the opportunity. It's very exciting, and the things we're doing are fantastic.
And Margaret, why do you think it's working at SunTrust specifically?
Well, really, it is, and I think Raj referenced it in his presentation too, it's a breath of fresh air. You know, so many of us grew up in an age where talking about money was taboo. And what we saw, what we see now, is we really needed to spark a change in that conversation, a change in those behaviors, and do our part as a purpose-driven company to get our teammates, our clients, and our communities on the road to financial well-being. The connectivity of financial well-being to physical and mental well-being is just undeniable. And I really think the timing was right, people craved it, people enroll, people engage, and it makes a difference.
From our perspective, from the board side, so the board is supportive of our purpose journey. They know how critical it is to our success. They know how important it is to reward our teammates and to put our teammates first and to heal from within, as Raj said. The decision to invest $10 million in this was a 2-minute conversation with the board. We had them at hello, essentially, because they bought into what we wanted to do and they knew the impacts that it would have. We don't talk about the measures so much about retention and engagement and performance because those are just positive outgrowths of this. The key is do it because it's right. It's the right thing to do. That was the driver for us, not the economics. How about these 2 purpose-driven leaders? Can we give them a great round of applause? So what we hope is that, just like John noted with doing Hope Inside, our goal is to be a pebble in the pond. Our goal is to start a movement. We're fundamental believers that employer-driven financial well-being may just be the key. When you get the paycheck and the education together, when they come together, they're delivered at the same time versus being disparate, versus being somewhere else along the way. That may just be the key. And we want to be, again, that proverbial pebble in the pond, someone who starts that dialogue and that conversation. We want to start a movement about financial well-being. And as Brian said, we lead this as a not-for-profit. I wanted to do it for free. I said, Brian, we're going to do this for free. I said free about 50 times. And he said, well, no one will respect it if it's free. He said, so do it. Well, can you at least tell me you'll do it at cost? So can you imagine this negotiation? I'm wanting to do it for free, and he's wanting to charge. And he said, we have to actually do something that has value for our teammates. We're proud to be here. We're proud to be engaged in this dialogue. John, we thank you personally and all your team for starting a conversation, because everything starts with a conversation. So thank you for allowing us to be here today, and have a great forum.
I'm going to let you walk in front of me.
Go.
Good evening. My name is Anthony McFarland.
And I'm Tisha McFarland.
And we're the proud owners of the Honey Bun Cake Factory. We're the world's first honey bun cake factory that specializes in making honey buns in the form of a cake. Get excited. And over 50 different flavors. Yeah. want to share you real quick how we got started. In 2014, I was working for a job for 4 years, and then I got laid off. Company went out of business. Actually, yeah, laid off. And what happened was I was devastated, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to say when I go home and tell my family, because I got to support them. But my wife and I, we came together, and we was like, you know what? Let's make our family recipe of our honey bun cakes and to local communities and flea markets to have little money going in until I find. They helped us establish a legal foundation. But when we graduated from Operation Hope, they helped us get into not only one, but into 50 restaurants across the DC metropolitan area, as well as an online store. And we travel all over the US doing real big, large festivals, you know. But also, I just want to give special thanks to Hope Inside and Acostia and SunTrust for making our dreams become a reality. Thank you. And we see you guys tomorrow, so I can tell you more about the honey bun cake story. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because I live in Maryland, I've had their honey bun cakes, and folks, I don't know if they're giving out samples while they're here. You need to get some. The McFarlands are fantastic. Their success story is for real, but their cakes are even better. All right, so thank you again. Next up, we have an incredible group of guests who will lead us through the future of work. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Mark P. Becker, President of Georgia State University; Nancy Harris, EVP and Head of North America SAGE; Harry Wilson, Chairman and CEO of Mava Group; and Dennis Lockhart, he is former President of Atlanta Federal Reserve. And your moderator is Lauren Feldman, Senior Editor of Forbes magazine. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Lauren Feldman with Forbes. We're here to talk about the future of work and what's coming with artificial intelligence. Since I know less about this than anybody else on the stage, I'm going to lead the conversation. And I'm going to start by asking each of my panelists to introduce themselves, tell us what you do, and tell us how nervous should we be about the arrival of artificial intelligence and what that's going to do to the future of work.
Okay, so I'm Mark Becker. I'm the president of Georgia State University right here in downtown Atlanta with over 50,000 students. Thank you. A few alums in the room or students.
How did you do that?
It's a hometown, home team fans. So I think, the answer to your question in a true academic answer is it depends. You should either be nervous to the extreme or supremely excited about what the future of work is. My assumption is that anything can be routinized will. We saw that first with manufacturing production lines and then the advent of robots. Well, other things are coming, and you'll hear examples from many of us up here, whether it's autonomous vehicles or whether it's going to be having intelligent systems reading your x-rays instead of a radiologist. So the future of work is disrupted. But on the exciting side, about 2/3 of the students in high school today believe that they are going to work for themselves as opposed to work for an employer per se. And what that tells me is that they're actually thinking about what is the future of work. The future of work is you as an individual in the workforce are going to have to think about what is your value? What value do you add? If your value is that you can do a mundane activity over and over again, whether it's working on a production line, driving a vehicle, or reading x-rays, you're toast. But on the other hand, if you take very seriously what your value is, whether it's your ability in a customer-facing environment to provide supreme service, or whether it's some technological skills that you have, or the ability to take technological skills and add value to an organization, your future is extremely bright. So it depends. The greatest risk, the greatest nervousness is the threats to income inequality. We already have too great income inequality in this country. And if this goes badly, it's going to get worse. If we handle it well, we all benefit.
When you say some people are toast, is it time to start thinking about that?
It's well past time to be thinking about that. I think in the November 2016 election, you saw the results of that. A highly dissatisfied electorate that feels that they've been left behind by the workforce, by the economy.
And so I think we're well behind thinking about that and having policy change that's going to help us as a nation, whether it's be it the rural or urban areas, deal with the real issues of that. The nature of work, the nature of employment is changing dramatically.
Nancy?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nancy Harris. I'm the Managing Director of Sage North America. Sage develops software that serves small and medium businesses for accounting, payments, payroll, and human capital management. So I come from the software development world. And in terms of should we be nervous, I would say moderately nervous. And why I qualify that is much like Mark's remarks, in that there's a lot of positive that can come from artificial intelligence and from where we're heading. We surveyed and did a productivity tracker, and if you think about this stat, as of noon today, tracking from January 1st of this year, $77.6 billion in workers in small and medium businesses spending their time on administrative and mundane routinized work. And if you think about that and what can happen in terms of artificial intelligence and automation, we can take that routinized work away from people and elevate what they do to be much more strategic, much more advisory, and much more rewarded financially. The however and the but is that what does that do to our workforce in terms of loss of jobs for people who perform those duties day in and day out? And so we have to think about that, and how do we train the future workforce to be flexible in how they think and how they learn so that they can move from that type of work to another level of work. And that's where I say eyes wide open. We need to start now. We're behind, quite frankly. We need to educate. We need to ensure that we provide education so that we make these technologies accessible to all, both large corporations, small businesses, and to individuals in terms of what their skill set is. And one of the things that we often think about is that we also have to be very thoughtful, not only about accessibility, but about ethics. And so what you'll hear from some of the panelists today is when you think about artificial intelligence, the other somewhat nerve-wracking or scary part can be, how are we training artificial intelligence? Is there a bias in the data sets that we're using to train AI? And is it perpetuating unconscious bias that we have in our society? So lots of food for thought, but there has to be, I view it as there's a balance to this nervousness, and there's some positives and some drawbacks.
This isn't just a theoretical conversation for you. You guys are already doing this at Sage.
That's right. That's right. We have already developed chatbots as an example where you can actually speak to the chatbot. The chatbot, you could say, upload this expense to my general ledger. It will upload the expense into your accounting product, and away you go. So we spend a lot of time internally within our labs having conversations about things like the ethics of AI and how do we do this the right way.
We use chatbots to help onboard students from high school into college. So chatbots are just about everywhere now.
Yeah.
Harry?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harry Wilson. I'm the founder and CEO of the Mava Group. It's a turnaround merchant bank where we work with companies that are in trouble. And many of the companies we deal with are companies that are in trouble because of automation and the implications for their business models. And what you're seeing across the economy is the same wave of automation that has transformed industrial manufacturing, particularly heavy manufacturing, is now sweeping into more refined manufacturing and the services sector. You see the early signs of this in automated checkouts, or the 100,000 robots, literally 100,000 robots that work at Amazon today, or the push towards autonomous driving. But the key problem as we look forward from where we are today is as that trend accelerates, the job displacement will begin to exceed job creation. The best work I've seen on this topic is from my friend Karen Harris at Bain & Company. They think that by the year 2030, 20 to 25% of American jobs will disappear. Now, I'm not quite as dire as that. I think these things take longer. And I think that where we sit today, people can't foresee, fortunately, people can't foresee job creation that will take place as a result of the changes that take place in the economy over the next 15 to 20 years. But it's clear that massive dislocation is coming to the job categories that are most affected by it. And it's clear that I think it'll exacerbate income inequality, as Mark said, as you see the owners of automation and those who develop mechanisms to do this benefit and through the network effect, and those who are on the receiving end, unfortunately, are hurt by it. And I think that'll have some really profound public policy consequences over the next 15 to 20 years. The last thing I'll add out for the intro here is that as everybody has said, with great challenge comes great opportunity. And I think there are a couple things that are also clear. One is flexibility and adaptability will be critical going forward. It won't be, and that's just true for kids in high school today, but also true for all of us. And be able to kind of adapt and foresee and be able to plan for the future critical. And then secondly, I think government, or both political parties, is terrible at dealing with long-term challenges. And I think the last 20 years have proved that on both sides of the aisle. And so where the onus really falls is on entrepreneurs. Everybody in this room, everybody we know, whether you're a for-profit entrepreneur or a not-for-profit entrepreneur, and developing mechanisms, training, protocols, systems that allow people to transition and to manage this transition to a more automated economy. So that's the challenge and the opportunity.
Harry, again, this is not a theoretical conversation for you. You just said this is something you're dealing with right now. You specialize in helping companies that are being impacted by this today. Can you give us an example of that? What are people facing today?
Yeah, I'll give you a pro and a con. So I'm on 2 corporate boards. These are both public companies. Visteon, large, used to be a division of Ford, large auto parts supplier, and they are a leader in developing systems for autonomous driving. And so that's a huge business opportunity for them. This is a business that has, in terms of profitability, quintupled in the last 4 years and will continue to grow, we think, going forward. So it's an opportunity for them to really help drive this space. On the other side, I'm on the board of Sotheby's, the auction house. Now, there's an example of a business that should be highly human capital dependent. I can't tell you the difference between one Picasso and another. Maybe other people in this room can. The experts at Sotheby's absolutely can. And they can put really accurate prices on those. And you would think that's something that's really hard to automate. But one of the things we're wrestling with right now is how can you automate it and taking the same technology that you use for facial recognition, but using it for painting recognition and be able to kind of further refine that, not immediately, but over time, to be able to provide that caliber of expertise on an automated basis. And so, of course, to design that, you need human capital, right, up front. You need the expertise up front. But once it's built in and continually refined, it can outpace the ability of humans and eliminate some of these bias issues that humans have over time. So it's both a threat and an opportunity for something like Sotheby's.
Dennis?
I'm Dennis Lockhart, the former president of the Atlanta Fed, and now I'm hustling to get work.
How's that going?
I'll make 3 points. One way to think about what is coming is a useful construct of a scholar at MIT, David Autor is his name, and he thinks in terms of a simple framework of cognitive and non-cognitive work. Cognitive meaning basically that it requires brain work more than brawn to do the work, and repetitive and non-repetitive. So non-cognitive, non-repetitive is your basic manual labor, day labor. There are a lot of jobs in this category, and actually that category of work is less imperiled by what's happening. The non-cognitive but repetitive has largely already been automated or is in the process of being automated. And people in that category clearly are fighting against a big trend. What is most interesting is cognitive repetitive. And it's already been said here. And that work is being automated at a fairly rapid pace. At the top end of that is the cognitive non-repetitive. Most of the people in the room do that kind of work. It requires that you problem solve every day. And those people are, to some extent, protected. However, I would say that the divisions between cognitive and non-cognitive, clearly machine work is encroaching upon human work. And in the future, it's going to be a little bit more clear that there is a category of machine work and a category of human work. So let me go to a second study that I found very interesting, a Harvard economist named David Deming. And he argues that the growth of jobs that require social work skills, teamwork, collaboration, communication skills, that category has been growing, while the pure STEM work with no social interaction requirement has actually been on the decline. So many of us grew up in the revenge of the nerds period. The true nerds' days may be numbered now. You're going to have social skills, call this human work, social skills like empathy, like the ability to read nuanced emotions and so forth, in order to thrive in the future. I'll make one final point, which is maybe a little bit pedantic, but it's certainly one of the ways I organize my own thinking, and that is I see a difference between work and jobs. I think there's plenty of work to do in our society. You can drive around any city, you can go through neighborhoods, you can look at all the things that need to be done, and that's work. A job is funded work. And Harry mentioned entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the people who translate work into jobs because they find a way to fund a particular quotient of work. And I think there will be a great premium on that in the future. But I don't see any lack of work. We have plenty of work to do. The issue will be jobs. And finally, I think this will come quickly, but still will be evolutionary, not revolutionary. The world is not going to turn the lights off on jobs overnight. And in all likelihood, job content will change in its mix. And the human side will become more emphasized, and the routine or repetitive aspect of jobs will be automated.
It's interesting. I think there's some cognitive dissonance on those very issues. I mean, right now, we're all expecting this this wave to hit. There are going to be lots of people looking for work. It's going to be terribly disruptive. But right now, I talk to business owners all the time who can't find enough employees. The job market, we know, is incredibly tight. When's it going to change? What's going to happen that's going to drive this home and make us realize that we're in a brave new world?
Well, one of the drivers is clearly going to be competition in various industries, so that people leading businesses will have no choice but to bring automation or robotics or artificial intelligence into the mainstream of how they do something in their particular company. And how quickly that happens is going to vary from industry to industry, I think. And I've seen discussions in writing of the difference between what you might call tangible and physical industries versus really true cognitive industries or service industries that depend more on human thinking than they depend upon moving things around or whatever. And whether artificial intelligence invades that whole segment of really physical industries is an interesting question. There's certainly indications that that's going to happen. Mines, for example, today operate with autonomous vehicles. That's a good example. But the techno-pessimists out there believe that it will be a long time before those industries have the degree of automation that service industries have.
Have you started doing anything differently at Georgia State to prepare students?
Well, certainly, you got to educate students for jobs that don't exist today. So your focus in education has to be on learning to learn, learning to teach yourself, learning to get re-educated, and a big emphasis on entrepreneurship. As I said, 2/3 of the students come in think they're going to work for themselves. Some are going to be an entrepreneur, and the definition of an entrepreneur is a person who creates thousands of jobs. Others are going to be small business people that hire literally dozens, maybe to a few hundred people. And some are going to be independent contractors. And so we're in this process of figuring out how do you prepare people for that world, and they're going to have to figure out where is their value in that space. Are they going to be an independent contractor as opposed to having a job for a particular entity, like a company? Or are they going to be a small business person, which is really the appetite of a lot of young people today? And a few are going to be entrepreneurs. They're going to create something from nothing and literally employ thousands of people, and it's going to make a big difference. So what students are looking for in terms of the degrees, the technology. We're seeing students in the humanities that want more analytical skills, more computational skills. So what students are studying and what we're preparing for them is changing. But the other piece I want to kick into this is we actually have an example of this change just from where I sit, and that is when I came into this business of higher education over 30 years ago, we had something called secretaries. We don't have secretaries anymore. And I was told in 1985 that I really did not need a personal computer on my desk because we had somebody to type your papers for you. And in less than 5 years, nobody was typing papers for anyone anymore. We were all doing we're using then called word processors. So we have many fewer secretaries. In fact, we have almost none. We now have executive assistants, but they have higher level cognitive skills. Communication skills become a premium, for example.
Mark, as an educator, is it appropriate to think that higher education is teaching people how to learn so that they can adapt in the future, as opposed to stuffing some amount of knowledge into their heads?
Yeah, and that's the change. I mean, those of us with gray hair remember when you memorized. And students today will tell you, I can Google that, or I can find it on YouTube, see how to do it. It's not about memorizing a set of facts, but it's having enough of a knowledge base to know where to go get information, where to teach yourself, how to continue learning, and know whether that learning you need is short-term or long-term, such as more education as opposed to a little research project.
And even skills are static,
yeah,
in the sense that they're likely to be obsoleted in the future at some stage.
Well, and some of these are sort of non-obvious, like keywords. In this world, being able to think of what are the right keywords to go find information is not an immediately obvious thing. Now, we sort of teach that implicitly in higher education. We don't have a course on keywords, but as you go through your educational experience, you become more and more adept at understanding which keywords are going to get you the information you're looking for. Because you can waste a lot of time in Google and YouTube, as well as be extremely productive, depending on your facility with search terms, keywords.
Nancy, I talk to a lot of small business owners, and I get the sense that they fall into two types. They're either in a constant state of crisis, or they're in denial. And given that, this just seems like such a difficult issue for them to address, to prepare for. What do you see?
Well, many of our customers, hundreds of thousands, are in the millions globally, are small businesses. And so, preparation is sometimes challenging. And somebody mentioned the recruitment efforts. It always seems like we're all, regardless of business size, looking for those qualified workers. And I believe that is sometimes a challenge for small businesses. But I wanted to mention something that I think we sometimes may not even think about when we use the term AI and where it can help small businesses. And that's in this notion of augmented intelligence. Augmented intelligence being data analytics. Mark mentioned training students today to use data at their fingertips to make smart decisions. Small businesses, medium businesses, large corporations all have access to data these days that's very rich about their business. And so when we talk about teaching small businesses how to think progressively, think about the data that's at your fingertips and doing things like what we refer to in human capital management as people science. Thinking about your workforce, thinking about recruitment, thinking about patterns of where you found talent in the marketplace and mining that data. And that's accessible to all. And so that's an example of where we think of this very narrow, machine-oriented job displacement definition of AI, where the reality is data and analytics is another, augmented intelligence is another definition that can really help small and medium businesses.
Do you see that? Do they appreciate that opportunity?
There's a learning curve there, I think, to understand that this data is readily accessible and how to take advantage of it. And so, even when you think about things like your human capital management type of system, and with the SaaS environment, people running software on subscription these days, the price of software as a subscription is so affordable, easily accessible online. All of your data is stored there. And so you can go and mine that data and you can mine your customer data. Where am I having success? Where I'm marketing to? Where am I hitting the right demographic? What is the right demographic? How do I use search terms on Google and other search engines to target more of those suspect and likely suspect customers? So it is a learning curve, but it's something that's very accessible to all.
Harry, you focus on the automotive segment a lot, and one area that people are always talking about is, it's going to hit with drivers.
Yep.
We're not going to need truck drivers. We're not going to need cab drivers. Is that the right place to focus? Is that where it's going to hit first? And do you have a sense of what these people are going to do?
Yeah, I don't know that it'll be first, but it certainly creates huge challenges because it is a large sector of the economy. There are 3 million Americans who drive a truck for a living, about 500,000 folks who drive a cab, another 500,000 who drive an Uber, and then there are hundreds of thousands who drive a delivery truck for UPS or FedEx or others. So you're talking about one of the largest kind of job categories. And clearly the technology from automated driving is right around the corner. General Motors has said publicly that they will have automated taxis picking up people in 2019, next year. GM, Mercedes are on the front end of that curve. The worst performers are a few years behind them. But in the early 2020s, the technology will clearly be there. It's just a question of how the regulatory framework will work around that. And so it's a huge issue. I don't know if it'll be the first area, but you have that tension. And it's even harder than that because right now, for example, we have a shortage of truck drivers. As truck drivers who came into the industry 40 years ago or getting ready to retire, it's obviously a very hard, difficult job. And so truck companies have a hard time recruiting drivers. And when those folks are worried that their job might not be there in 5 years, try getting someone to go through 12 months of training. So you have this really kind of this bubble effect where you have folks who, because of the acceleration of automation, is still on the lower end outside of some core areas. We have this kind of false high of extremely low unemployment in the next 2 or 3 years that I think will be offset over time.
There have been examples so far, especially in warehouse type environments where people have, like Amazon, have adopted more robotic technology, but increased employment at the same time. Can that continue?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, is that, so 4 years ago, Amazon had 0 robots, 0. They probably had, and this I'm not sure about this number, about 350,000 employees, human employees. Today they have about 520,000 human employees, about 100,000 robots. And that number is accelerating. A year and a half ago, that number was 45,000. And so what you're seeing is the distribution center jobs, those are being automated because it's frankly much more efficient to be done by a robot. But all the work around that, logistics design, supporting your customer, marketing strategy, all those things that are higher end skills that play to a professional job set need more talent. And so all those are all the kind of, as Nancy talked about with augmented intelligence, there are a whole host of things that are 1 or 2 layers of the onion away from where we are today that aren't necessarily foreseeable, but that will create opportunities if you have the flexibility and the skill set to take advantage of them.
We're just about out of time. Does anybody have one more hopeful thought to leave us with?
Well, we need to worry about the people that don't have the skill sets and the knowledge and that get left behind in this universe. That's a big public policy challenge that we can't solve in 15 seconds.
That's not the hopeful thought I was looking for.
Can I give you one?
But that's a call to action. It's going to be a challenge we're going to face as a nation, and it's not far off.
I'll give you a program, Apprenticeship Carolina. It's one of the best programs I've seen. It's purely private sector run and managed. It started about a decade ago by Cooper Standard, I think was the original employer. And they now involve 700 companies in South Carolina. They've had 11,000 apprentices. They expect to double that number in the next 2 years. And it's all a partnership of junior colleges and employers who weren't getting the multidisciplinary skill set they needed out of local schools. And so they created a bunch of highly specialized majors. So that's not going to solve the problem 15 years from now, but it's going to solve the problem 3 to 5 years from now. And I think if we see more and more of those efforts nationally on a regional basis, it'll make a huge difference.
Lauren, I'll give you a hopeful point. Work will be safer in the future.
If you have it.
If you have it.
If you have it.
Hey. Safer if you don't have it, too.
Dennis Lockhart, Harry Wilson, Nancy Harris, Mark Becker, thank you all.
Thank you, Lauren.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Joyce Rogers, and I am so honored to be before you today for many reasons. You will hear in a minute, but I am honored to be a part of Operation Hope's forum today. I want to share with you what Operation Hope means to me, what it has personally done for me, by sharing with you my testimony. In 2014, it was a wintry day, beautiful day. I woke like everyone in this room woke up to begin their day. I entered my bathroom and I fell dead on my bathroom floor. I had suffered an aneurysm and I had to work my way back through that process if that wasn't enough. The following year, 2015, I took ill. I thought it was a cold. I had to be rushed to the hospital, and I was immediately diagnosed with leukemia, so I did not leave the hospital. I spent a couple of months in the hospital with radiation and all the medications that we have available to us to save my life. Through that process, as you can all imagine, I lost everything, down to the clothes on my back. And so while that wasn't enough, I had to live with my 25-year-old child who I, as the mother, should have been helping him. He had to be the one help me. He had his own place with a roommate, and thank God they agreed to let me come live with them as I recover, as I work my way through the process of healing. My 25-year-old gave up his bed and slept on the floor. That's for the last 2 years he's been on the floor. And through that process, of course, credit shot. I had nothing. Everything is gone. And so each day as I laid in the bed, I asked God, how do I begin again? Okay, my eyes are open, I'm breathing, I see, I'm gonna live. But how do I begin again? Every day I ask that question. And one day, while laying there, I had my cell phone in my hand, and Mr. Bryant of Operation Hope came on Facebook Live. He began to talk about what Operation Hope could do to change a life and how important Operation Hope is economically. And I knew laying there, I needed, for me, I needed my economics to change. If there was gonna be any hope, it had to be there. So I locked into what he was saying. He spoke directly, if you all can imagine, to my soul. I was hopeless. I was in I didn't know what I was gonna do, where I was gonna go, but when he spoke, it connected with me inside, and I used that as my food. Every time he came on, I paid attention to every word he said. I ate everything he said, and it strengthened me. It gave me that hope. I want to share that with you all because that's all people need. They need hope regardless of how low you fall. Life hits us. It may not hit everyone, or it may be in a different way, and because it's not as bad as the next person, we may think, you know, why are you going through all that? Life hits us. And so with that, bad credit and all, I called Operation Hope, and I'm like, I need help. I need a financial advisor. I need a coach. Show me how to do this thing because my credit is shot. And I was able to be connected with John C. Lee. She became my representative, and she was awesome because understanding my condition and that I was barely getting around physically, she used technology to get me everything I needed, every paperwork I needed to sign, everything that needed to be done so that she could work with me via the telephone. And she did that. And everything she told me to do, and the more I got stronger physically, everywhere she told me to go, every place she sent me to, which was to SunTrust, Hope Inside SunTrust Atlanta, everything she told me to do, I did. And guess what? My son's roommate decided to get engaged and got married. And that's a great thing. The young people should be doing what they have to do. But that meant that they were not going to continue their lease. That meant that, oh my God, we're going to be homeless, or what we're going to do. And lo and behold, none of us knew that things were going to happen that way. But at the same time, because of my obedience of working and building my credit, because of course my son has student debt, high credit cards maxed out, so his score is low. So you know the cost of debt when your credit score is low. But thanks be to God in Operation Hope, I was doing what I needed to do to build my credit score. My score went up 100 points. Ah, yeah. Oh, yeah. And so when it was time for us to go and apply, we went and applied to get housing. And guess what, y'all? We picked up our keys Sunday. Sunday. And it's beautiful. It is beautiful. And I am so grateful, but I realize that this is still only the beginning for me. Because there is a reason that God did not let me die. Both times I should have been gone. But there is something greater that he knows that I'm going to do in this earth. And I'm declaring that I'm not leaving this earth until I do my part. And I believe that is with, seriously, Operation Hope. I really want to encourage you all to know that there are people like myself. Whatever happens to people, for whatever reason they're down, we don't always know. But they're just as important as everybody that had their stuff together. And we have to understand that. We must remember that. So please, 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 if you all take nothing else away from today, understand that when you infuse people, as Mr. Bryant did me, with a hope, just a little bit of hope, you can transform their life even if you never met them. I never met Mr. Bryant until yesterday. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. So do not take who you are for granted. Do not take who you are for granted to not understand that you affect whoever comes into your space, whether it's via technology or whether they're in your physical presence. Understand that you have something dynamic to give them to change their lives. If we begin to stop looking at people negatively and fearing people before we know who they are or what they're doing, we have the power within our hands to change this entire world. And in final, I will say this. Operation Hope truly is the answer. I don't want any of us to take that for granted. Economically, we have this key in our hand to really shift global economies. We can do it. Together we can do it. So let's do it, folks. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah. Joyce Rogers. Joyce Rogers.
if you never met an emotional billionaire, you just met one. She is, if we had 1,000 of her in every city in America, every problem would be solved. Give her another round of applause. Just met her yesterday, and she had me crying. She's what we get up every day for. That's why we do our work every day, because every big business is once a small one. And heroes and sheroes have changed this world, but they come from modest beginnings. And you may have manicured nails right now, but I guarantee you go back 3 generations in your family, and you're going to find somebody who had dirt under their nails. So we cannot take things for granted. We cannot push people aside. Remember that Walmart was started by a guy with a pickup truck and a storefront and a high school education named Sam Walton. Now it's the biggest retailer in the world. Every big company was a small one. So we just met an emotional billionaire. You're about to meet in a minute another friend of mine who's a public billionaire who my friend here will properly introduce, Jonathan Reckford, who is the CEO of Habitat for Humanity. You're going to meet this incredible human being, a public billionaire who's putting public good out in not only the U.S. but all around the world, and a very cool guy. I want to reintroduce, though, a real billionaire. Harry, come out here right quick. Now, you met him, but he wasn't introduced the right way. I told you got billionaires next to millionaires, next to 100 heirs, next to somebody trying to buy some air. Now, this smart guy that was sitting right here, you remember him? Smart guy, humble, going through the, just answering the questions. I'm sorry, he said, oh, yeah, I'm CEO or something, blah, blah, blah. No. Rich. I'm talking about like really, really, really rich. And really, really, really nice. So you remember the restructuring of the automobile industry under President Obama? The point person who restructured the entire automobile industry is this man.
Just General Motors, just one company.
Up until recently, the largest shareholder of General Motors was this man. The guy who owns the company that my fiance wants to go tour next week, Sotheby's, is this man. The guy that just turned around, what's the jean company? True Religion Jeans, is this man. I can go on and on and on. But recently he said, what should he do with his time? And he's thinking about running for governor. I said, don't waste your time with that. Get yourself involved in the community. Roll up your sleeves. I want very quickly for him to say, he didn't even know I was bringing him up here. What he told me backstage about how he's spending his time, what he's really, really passionate about. Come on. Sure. Show him your heart.
Thanks, John. Hi again, everyone. Just to be clear, it was our group, not me personally, that did all that. So it was, I'm not nearly as rich or as good as John said I was. But no, but John asked me backstage, what are you most passionate about? We were just talking about some of the business things we're involved in. He said, what are you most passionate about? I don't know if you're expecting me to mention an investment or not, but the thing that we're most passionate about, so my wife and I spend our time on, is early childhood development. And she spends almost all of her time when she's not with the kids, and I spend a chunk of my time. And the reason we're so focused on it is because you can have such a huge impact on kids in a much more cost-effective way than all the remediation stuff that takes place later on in life. So as a program, for example, we're involved in called Parent-Child Home Program. You may or may not know, it depends where you live. It's only in 12 states today. We're trying to roll it out nationally over time. It's run by an incredible woman named Sarah Walzer. And what they do is they bring staffers into the home to work with moms and their kids on reading. A lot of these homes don't have books, and they'll bring the books. And they'll read with the family every week for 2 years. And what they've found is that creating that love of reading at a young age, it only costs $4,000 a year per kid. It's about 1/7 the cost of pre-K. But that program has eliminated the achievement gap for lower income kids in states where it's been done. So when you think about that, the average 3-year-old who's from an upper middle income family has heard 30 million more words than the average 3-year-old from a lower income family. That's what the problem is. These kids, through no fault of their own, are behind the 8 ball because they're just not being exposed to enough words and reading because their moms, and I say mom because it's usually a mom, who's there working 2 jobs just to pay the bills. And so this program, for a relatively low cost, can help close the achievement gap and really create a great opportunity for these kids. And so that's the kind of things that I think, as we as a society spend more and more resources and early childhood development, I think we'll be able to eliminate those achievement gaps and create American dreams for everybody. So, thank you.
Unscripted, no notes. 2 things. 1, who says you can't be successful, brilliant, and kind? Who says you can't? And to lean in, he came here on his own accord, gave his time, gave his energy, gave his heart, and now he's giving back to our community to make sure he produces more success stories just like him. Now, you were excited when you saw Chris Tucker last night. You were breaking your neck trying to get a photo with Chris Tucker. You never know who you're walking right next to in these hallways. Stop and say hello to everybody. It might just be your future employer or your future investor.
All right. Remember I said when we first opened, I said, introduce yourself to the person next to you because you never know who can help make your dreams come true because they don't always dress like everybody else. And was Joyce not rocking a big fro? Was that night awesome? I saw her backstage and I said, I love your fro. All right, let's move it on, folks. I'll say couple of reminders. The Kids Place Marketplace, when you leave here today, go and support those kids. A lot of them have their products here and they would love to share it with you. And if you don't know how to get in touch with them, they got cards. They will give you business cards. Also, speaking of business cards, the honeybuncakefactory.com is where you can get your honey bun cakes because they told me they didn't bring enough samples for all of you. Go check them out. Once again, the honeybuncakefactory.com. Okay, let's keep on moving. Next is our guest, the Chief Executive Officer of Habitat for Humanity International, one of my absolute favorite charities, Mr. Jonathan Reckford. You see here are 2 people who love college basketball. He's a Tar Heel. I'm a Jayhawk.
We have a couple more weeks as the national champions, but this year's not looking so good. Good morning. It's great to see everyone here, and I am delighted to be a part of these conversations. It's been my privilege to get to know John Hope Bryan over the last decade, and I'm honored to call him my friend, and I have tremendous respect for this mission. That's why I was excited to be a part of this forum. The forum's attracted an amazing group of leaders and reinforces just how crucial it is for the public, private, and nonprofit sectors to come together to empower families and to help them succeed. The efforts of Operation Hope and of Habitat for Humanity are clearly aligned as we seek to build human and financial capital and to create an economy that works for everyone. One of the lesser-known heroes of Habitat for Humanity is a man named Clarence Jordan, a pastor who in the 1940s started an interracial farm in southwest Georgia. And then in the 60s, he and a small group of people came up with this idea of a fund for humanity that later became Habitat for Humanity. And he had a quote that was so far ahead of his time, just as his interracial farm was ahead of its time. And he said, what the poor need is not charity, but capital. Not caseworkers, but co-workers. And what the rich need is a wise, honorable, and just way of divesting themselves of their overabundance. And he had a vision that everyone had something to give and everyone had something to gain when we come together. Habitat's hand up, not a handout philosophy directs us to focus on the dignity of those with whom we partner and to offer hope to those who are seeking a better life. Indeed, our mission is to bring people together to build homes, communities, and hope. And we're committed to helping people grow into all that God intends. Frank Martell is going to speak to you in a moment about the future and reimagining of the mortgage process. I want to spend a few minutes first talking about why housing matters so much. Often as I begin conversations with groups of policymakers and influencers, I ask a very simple but pointed question. How many of you grew up in substandard or poverty housing? You wouldn't be surprised to find that very few people ever raise their hand. Many times, to our surprise, housing gets left out of the conversation of poverty alleviation because it's a relatively invisible problem in our world where people are becoming more and more economically segregated. Those who have the power to affect change rarely are aware of the multitude of problems that exist when families lack a decent, healthy place to call home. They don't have any idea what day-to-day life was like for a young mother in Nicaragua I met who was afraid that her baby would experience developmental problems if he didn't crawl. However, if he moved around on the dirt floor and put fingers in his mouth, he might easily end up with diarrhea or skin or respiratory diseases. What a terrible choice for a parent to have to make. I understand that those who live in good housing conditions can't imagine the innumerable struggles that come with living in substandard housing. They can't quite grasp the idea of 15 people living in a one-bedroom home. Nor can they imagine a successful business leader in the U.S. who grew up always fearing that someone would visit his home and ask to use the bathroom. He was terrified of having to say, "We don't have one." In 2015, in the United States, nearly 21 million renters and 18 million homeowners spent more than 30% of their income on housing. 30% is the threshold that's considered to be the maximum affordable limit to still have money for all the other needs of life. The Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University also reports that more than 11 million renter households and 8 million homeowners spend more than 50% of their income on housing. Those are severely cost-burdened households. To put it another way, more than half the adults in the United States have made at least one trade-off in recent years to cover their rent or mortgage. Those trade-offs include taking a second job, cutting back on health care or healthy food, or moving to a neighborhood they perceive to be less safe. Globally, the situation is far worse. Only 1 in 4 people worldwide have lack adequate shelter. And when natural disasters or health issues arrive, those who have the fewest resources and live in the most vulnerable conditions always suffer the most. Historically, home ownership has been the best way for low-income and especially low-income minority families to build financial assets that can be passed down to future generations. Home ownership creates a built-in savings account, provides stability for children, and encourages increased neighborhood involvement. In addition, numerous studies show how important adequate housing is to better health, to improved education outcomes, and to new income-earning opportunities. It's, of course, not the only factor, but it's really a prerequisite or foundation. If you pull housing out of the equation, all of those other important social outcomes are negatively impacted. Let's start with a quick look at health. The United Nations has estimated that more than 10 million people worldwide die each year from conditions related to substandard housing. Boston pediatrician Megan Sandel tells a chilling story about the importance of healthy housing. She admitted a young girl with asthma to the intensive care unit. The child's asthma condition had previously been well controlled, so Dr. Sandel kept asking the family what was different, what had changed. It became clear that one of the changes in the child's environment was that the family had acquired a cat, even though the child was allergic to cats. So why would they do that? Because there were mice in the house. They actually found a mouse in their daughter's bed. Dr. Sandel called that an incredible devil's choice. The decision they made concerning the mice problem likely resulted in the child ending up in the hospital. Dr. Sandel said that no amount of medication she could offer would make it safe to send that child back to the unhealthy place she lived. The prescription she wanted to write was for a healthy home. which she said is like a vaccine that provides both immunity and resilience. A safe home can prevent mental health and developmental problems. A decent home may prevent asthma or lead poisoning. And an affordable home can prevent stunted growth and unnecessary hospitalizations. It's just so clear how important a decent home is to the health of a family and to the health of communities. It's not a huge leap then to see the connection between stable housing and education. Overcrowding, inadequate light, leaky pipes, and deteriorating walls at home make it difficult to concentrate. A MacArthur Foundation report said that when families lived in poor quality housing, adolescents showed lower reading and math skills in standard achievement tests. A safe, quiet place to study, however, creates not only an environment in which one can learn, but also a space in which to plan and dream. Our desire at Habitat is to help families and communities build a better future. Adequate and affordable housing creates jobs, revitalizes neighborhoods, and attracts employers. It increases consumer spending and government revenues and lowers the risk of foreclosure, all while bringing transformative benefits to families and developing resiliency in communities. Better, affordable living conditions give families the ability and financial flexibility to make forward-looking choices. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they have a foundation and opportunities. Affordable housing efforts are needed now more than ever. Habitat has experienced explosive growth over the past 13 years. We went from serving 125,000 individuals in 2005 to 3.5 million worldwide last year. And that's, thank you. So we're excited about that, but we're not winning the bigger battle. The state of affordable housing is terrible in this country and even worse around the world. The housing deficit continues to rise along with growing economic inequality. In addition, here in the United States, we've pushed equitable service workers like firefighters, teachers, entry-level government workers, and hospital service workers out into the distant suburbs in search of affordable housing, where they face the additional cost and time burdens of traveling long distances to work. This is bad for their families and then leads to additional congestion that's bad for everyone. Internationally, the workforce is often driven far from urban centers into outlying informal settlements. When the sense of community is weakened and segregation among economic groups grows, myriad social problems often come from that. So what do we do? Certainly, we need to focus on helping people acquire the skills they'll need for a new economy, as our excellent panel just talked about. But we also have to address the issues that tend to perpetuate these cycles of poverty. And that starts with housing. We've seen in locations around the world how the creation of transit-oriented, mixed-income, mixed-use communities with access to housing, good schools, and jobs can create positive change across a wide variety of contexts. These developments are just one example of how solving housing challenges requires the cooperation of all sectors. I want to share just a little more about Habitat's efforts to be a part of the solution. Since 1976, we've been able to partner with over 13 million people to improve their housing conditions. You might be surprised to know that more than 90% of that is outside the United States. Many people think they know all about Habitat, but the first two things most people believe about Habitat turn out not to be true. The first one is that President Carter does not actually run Habitat, nor did he start it. He and his wife, Roland, are our most famous volunteers of our 2.1 million annual volunteers, and their 35 years of participation absolutely put Habitat on the map, and I don't think it would have become what it is without their leadership. Another even broader misconception is that we give away houses. Those who partner with our local Habitat affiliates here in the United States purchase their homes, which are more affordable because of donations and volunteer labor that allow us to provide no-profit mortgages. We leverage philanthropic gifts to serve more families by recycling those mortgage payments in the communities and also operating over 1,000 Habitat for Humanity restores, their home product recycling stores, that generated $456 million last year. Homeowners also take classes in financial literacy and home maintenance to better prepare them to be successful homeowners. And they put in hundreds of hours of sweat equity, as we call it, to earn their down payment. I was just down in Collier County, Florida, visiting victims of last fall's hurricane. And right as I walked into the local Habitat office, I walked in with a family who had just that afternoon finished their 500th hour of sweat equity while working full time. That's a remarkable investment and commitment. And I got to talk to Rolando and Yesenia, and they were going to go out now and look at lots and pick where their new home was going to be. And it's those little moments of grace that lift us up and help us see potential. In addition, we help families do repairs and renovations, and we're actively involved in neighborhood revitalization in over 300 communities across the U.S. We also help families come back from natural and man-made disasters. But many years ago, we recognized that Habitat for Humanity alone could never build our way out of the scale of the problem. So we've increased our advocacy efforts to support policies that can help remove barriers to affordable housing. We're in the midst of our Solid Ground campaign in 38 countries to improve access to land for affordable housing. And this fall, we'll be launching a U.S. campaign around affordable home ownership. To help impact the housing deficit in other countries, we've created the Terwilliger Center for Innovation and Shelter to help make the markets work better for low-income families. One of our most successful funding initiatives has been in the area of housing microfinance. We actually created a fund, a wholesale fund called Microbuild, which raised capital and debt, and we lend money to microfinance organizations to help them start housing portfolios and give them technical assistance. That leveraged fund with $10 million of equity and $90 million of debt is midway through, and we've already helped 2 million people be able to improve their housing through home improvement loans. And we estimate by the end of the fund, it'll help 5 million people. But it's a good example of convincing the market that they can actually successfully lend to these low-income families that traditionally were never served by banks. Now, I've talked about a lot of numbers and activities, but it's important to remember that every one of those numbers is a family. A family like Joyce, a family like so many that you know, who've been able to lift themselves up because they got that chance. They have the same dreams, same hopes, same aspirations as each of us. I had one of those nice little surprise moments last fall, and I was helping a relative who had to go into the hospital for a procedure. And we got to the hospital, a wonderful woman named Anne just couldn't have taken better care of us in navigating the whole process. And she saw I was wearing, as always, a Habitat jacket or some Habitat logo on me. And she said, "Habitat, are you connected to Habitat?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Well, I tell you, I moved into my Habitat house 15 years ago, and it changed my life. And I've been able to prepare for my kids, save for retirement, and be able to build a life." And there are so many Anns out there who are going to make our communities a better place if they're just given the opportunity. It is, and home's not just a repository of memories. A decent place to live creates stability, launching families into a promising cycle of possibilities and progress. Shouldn't every child have that chance? Yes. At Habitat, we will continue to promote the role of housing as a means for improving quality of life. We'll continue to help remove the barriers that keep families from having a safe, decent place to call home. And we will continue to create opportunities to improve their living conditions and contribute to healthy, thriving communities. And I hope in these 2 days that you will catch a vision of how you can be a part of that solution, of empowering people, about giving them opportunity, and absolutely creating hope. And that you'll feel a sense of urgency to help do your part to build strong communities where the quality of life is improved for all of our people. So thank you, and God bless you.
once again, Jonathan Reckford, and really think about using them if you do donations or charity. That's a really solid organization. Now to help follow that up, please give a warm welcome to Hope Global Forum's welcome to Mr. Frank Martell. He is President and CEO of CoreLogic.
Good morning, everyone. Many thanks to John and his team for the invitation to speak today. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I joined the Operation Hope Global Board over a year ago, and it means a great deal to me to be part of this organization. In fact, all of us in the CoreLogic family believe profoundly in the mission of Operation Hope: to create a country where human dignity is the norm, to make free enterprise work for everyone, and to ensure that those in the greatest need can receive best-in-class financial literacy training. These are big goals, but as we all know, John and his team always look to solve the hardest, most persistent problems. They challenge adversity and move forward when others step back. They come up with ideas that are bigger than the obstacles in their path. And that's what makes Operation Hope so special. It is in this context of big ideas that I want to have a conversation with all of you today about perhaps the biggest idea which is shared by all of us, and that is the American dream. I think this quote sums up the American dream quite well. All of us want the opportunity to advance, and we're also a community that wants this to be true for everyone, not just for some. The American dream isn't partisan. It unites rather than divides. It is perhaps the idea that is the very center of our shared core values. If you ask Americans how they go about achieving the American dream, the vast majority will tell you that it includes owning a home. While this isn't a new idea, it's worth taking a look back to understand how homeownership has changed in America since World War II.
In the 1950s, post-World War II, the U.S. economy was booming. Coupled with new housing benefit programs and the invention of tract housing, Americans were inspired to move into the suburbs and raise their growing families. In the 60s, the Civil Rights Movement and the Vietnam War sparked a cultural revolution in America. Rebellion against the establishment defined this generation. The availability of affordable automobiles, investments in infrastructure, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968 promoted an urban sprawl, which resulted in one of the longest uninterrupted periods of housing expansion in U.S. history. By the 70s, the booming post-war economy had run its course. The me decade found itself in urban decay. Burdened by recession, high unemployment, and soaring inflation, Americans rebelled against societal norms. Ranch-style homes gained popularity, but they came with hefty price tags, making housing less affordable than in generations past. The 80s were all about keeping up with the Joneses. The desire to appear affluent gave rise to McMansions, and despite sky-high mortgages and interest rates, home sale records hit an all-time high. The 90s brought about the information age, which saw both the boom and bust of the internet. With the soaring stock market, declining interest rates, and record low down payment prices, the 90s saw a resurgence of urban living, and the housing bubble grew to dangerous levels. During the early 2000s, the digital decade brought us the millennial boom, smartphones, and social media. Homeownership peaked in 2004, but by 2007, the housing bubble didn't just burst, it imploded. The Great Recession brought the U.S. housing market to its knees. And 10 years later, we find ourselves asking, is the American dream still alive?
A lot has changed over the last 70 years, and that change is increasing. The incredible journey of homeownership, both the highs and the lows, continues in America today. Our nation's diversity is something we need to celebrate every day, and with this diversity comes new ideas about what owning a home means. How we live, where we work, the economy, access to funding and credit, how we think about family and community, the speed at which technology is being integrated into our lives. These are just a few of the factors that influence how our dream of home ownership will unfold. Now let's take a look at 3 conditions we face today. Each of these have implications, and the implications affect individuals in different ways, creating progress from some and challenges for others. Quickly, a tale of 2 cities unfold. Let me talk about a few of the important trends tied to these implications. First, as was discussed earlier, we have a major affordable housing inventory problem in this country. Although clearly never intended, the combination of local zoning, building codes, and layers of regulations may have gone beyond what's necessary for consumer protection. We need protections, no doubt, but we also need to rebalance local regulations in order to incent builders to return to mainstream America and to build more affordable homes. Next, tight credit policies are making it hard for even qualified consumers to get loans. In some ways, our fear of returning to risky underwriting practices that led up to the Great Recession has driven many lenders to avoid taking risks that result in otherwise qualified buyers from securing home mortgages. And finally, unfortunately, savings rates are falling for low and moderate income households. This is a fundamental challenge. Recent efforts to roll out lending programs with no or very low down payment requirements, although well-intended, have not fared well. We are still in need of responsible market incentives that balance risk distribution and provide for greater access to credit for homebuyers. Getting the mix of risk management and market incentives right for homebuyers and the economy remains an untapped opportunity. It's certainly clear that headwinds are increasing for aspiring homeowners. But I believe there are steps we can take to address many of the challenges that we face today. Despite the headwinds, the American dream persists, not just as an idea, but because we are a community, because we care for each other, and because the pursuit of happiness is not just an idea that applies to individuals. It's an idea that we, the people, believe in together. As policymakers, industry leaders, community organizers, and care providers, we all have both the opportunity but also the obligation not just to consider but to take action. But let's be clear, we're not talking about raising homeownership rates at all costs. In fact, homeownership peaked just prior to the Great Recession at almost 70%. While driven by well-meaning policy, we now know that putting people into homes they simply cannot afford is not sustainable. No one wants to relive the housing market boom or bust or the painful recovery over the last 10+ years. Likely, some of you in this room have experienced the results of our economy's crash through your personal loss or the loss experienced by your friends or loved ones. It was your savings that were lost. It was your equity that vanished almost overnight. Ultimately, there was a generation of American families who lost not just their homes, but the wealth they intended to pass on to their children. So let's take action to create a future where sustainable homeownership is not just possible, but realized in every community, where sustained home ownership remains a cornerstone of our nation's economy. With each building block of sustainability is important, let me talk about just a few of them. At the top of my list is sustainable employment and growing wages. I think for many, they would consider the chance to work and to succeed to be part of the American dream, just as home ownership is. In fact, one really follows the other, of course. But once you have money, you need to know how to manage it. I think the good news on this front is that John and the team at Operation Hope are already forging a path for all of us by raising the level of financial literacy across this country. While progress is being made, I'm sure John would agree that there's much more to be done. You know, I was raised to value education as a fundamental building block of our success. Unfortunately, today's skyrocketing costs have put education beyond the reach of many and have indebted a whole generation of potential home buyers. We need accessible, quality education, including vocational training, in much the same way that we need affordable homes. As I discussed earlier, we need a much larger supply of affordable homes. This will require expanded public-private partnerships and out-of-the-box thinking on such things as construction techniques, local regulations, and government programs to get the job done. Some ideas to explore include new modular construction techniques and 3D printing technology, which offers the prospect of high-quality homes at a dramatically lower cost of production. We also need to fund infrastructure development and repair. This has been debated too long in this country, and it's a necessary part of ensuring affordable housing. I know these are hard targets for action, and they won't be resolved simply because they're on this slide. Bringing these ideas to life requires us to think about the future state of home ownership and to commit ourselves to action. I think everybody believes the American dream of home ownership is alive and well, despite all the challenges we just discussed. In fact, I believe the future is an exciting one on many levels. Let's spend the next few minutes talking about several exciting trends in housing that will change our lives and those of our children and our grandchildren. As I said at the beginning of this talk, our nation and the world are rapidly becoming more diverse. This is today's and tomorrow's reality. Growing diversity, among other factors, will drive how we live and where we live. We have to plan on increasing urbanization and its effects on housing and the lifestyle of American families. Increasing density brought about by urbanization will certainly change how we interact and live our lives. We're also entering an age of unparalleled convenience. One enabler of our new convenience-driven lifestyle is the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things will be a powerful reality that connects us in ways that are hard to imagine. In fact, I think many of you in this room are already having conversations with various devices in your smart homes. As we look ahead, technology will become increasingly personalized to both individuals and to households. Even today, we're installing refrigerators in homes that can tell us when we're low on milk and eggs. This personal connection is what we all have with technology, and it's already changing the way we live and how we connect. And the great thing is we've only touched the surface of what's possible. It's my fervent wish that we all live longer lives and happier lives and contribute more to our society. In terms of housing, we will move more often to aging in place with our families around us. I personally think this is a great thing. This trend will impact the way we design and build future homes, and importantly, how we organize our communities as well. And finally, in addition to aging in place, the concept of a shared economy will bring benefits to our planet and change the expectations of our homes. Perhaps our views on eco-economics will challenge the traditional concept of a single-family home or the size of a home relative to an individual's carbon footprint. It's certainly a lot to think about. I have great optimism, but I also feel a great personal obligation, one that we all should share. We must recommit ourselves to the American dream at large and make the dream of sustainable home ownership achievable for more of our citizens. This is truly our time. From both a personal perspective and as a leader of the CoreLogic team, I feel a responsibility to stand with John and the Operation Hope team. Now is the time for action. This is why, on behalf of our company's more than 5,900 employees, we are today making an investment in Operation Hope of $200,000. I consider this an investment and a vote of confidence in Operation Hope and its mission. They have the right team. This is the right time to address our country's need for affordable housing and a sustainable housing economy. It's about the future where the American dream of home ownership is accessible to all that work hard, to all who aspire, and to all who achieve. John, can you please join me on the stage? Uh-oh. Anita's going to step in for John. So Anita, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Frank, on behalf of Operation Hope and John, we just want to thank you so much for this and your ongoing support. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Please support CoreLogic and thank them again for this incredible generosity. Thank you.
Oh my God, there he is.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you.
I always tell John, actions speak louder than words. So I'd invite everybody to join me in investing in John and the team. It's truly a pleasure and a privilege.
Man, I love you. So I'm multitasking. So when I step out, it's like 19 cameras pop out every square inch, which I'm honored to do. So I'm trying to make myself to the crowd. They say, well, you got to go here, you got to go here. So I'm going, I'm walking, text is going off. Okay. I look down, and it's my fiance, Shazer. You earned every credit of every love. She sent me a text that, look, they got a check for you. Get here. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, stand up. My fiance, Shazer Dawson. Okay. A $200,000 check. We did not expect this. This is what happens when you just do good in the world, right? Just do good. Frank, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
We got something for you.
Oh, my God.
In exchange for a $200,000 check, we're going to give you a $5 plate. Harry, I want you to pay close attention, Harry, my billionaire friend. You give us $1 million, and we may give you a plate with some food on it. Hey. Frank Martell, the CEO of CoreLogic, Hope Model Partnership Award, with special thanks to Frank Martell and the CoreLogic family for being the utmost example of both leadership and partnership. It is through activity of actively engaged and accountable relationships like yours that Operation Hope is able to positively affect our greater community. Now, that's what it formally says. Let me tell you something. When a friend of ours passed, Anand, former CEO, he passed on to glory, he's promoted. Frank called me, and normally I've got to chase the next CEO. Oh God, he was told, people say, oh, you meet with John Bryan, he's going to separate you from your wallet. Don't meet with him. Frank called me. I said, what's wrong with this guy? He called me and he poured it out his heart about how important it was to be a good corporate citizen and how much he felt this work in his bones. He knew about what we had done in the subprime mortgage crisis. And after Hurricane Katrina, they gave us a call center. They gave us a call center worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and let us put our employees there, then pay for the employees to be there. And we helped 300,000 people in response to Hurricane Katrina. And we restructured $1 billion in mortgages in response to the subprime mortgage crisis. And behind all that, the infrastructure, the hamster on the wheel, was Frank and the CoreLogic team, but they never asked for credit, never asked for any kind of thank you, nothing ever. And so we go forward, and he called me recently. He said, look, we need to get the bank more engaged. I'd like to be the vice, I'd like to take some role in board engagement. So now he's vice chairman of engagement of our global board. And he just keeps leaning in, and keeps leaning in, and keeps leaning in. So the next somebody tells you that people don't care about you, the next somebody tells you that the problem in the world is our leaders are disconnected and that nobody gives a dang about you, you now have at least one example of a CEO deep in Orange County who's a light on the hill, who believes passionately in the potential of people.
Thank you, John. Thank you, my friend. Thanks, everyone.
street